So we opened tonight in early to mid-January of 1455. You all have now arrived in Lincoln, met with Eden Everly, the elder now in control of Lincoln. There is a plan to meet with some of the eldest in Lincoln the next couple nights. Briefly, we'll look into each of the Gauntlet to see where they're at on the end of last session. I believe it was midnight, middle of the evening. We'll start with Cormac de Courcy, following your meeting with Eden Everly. What's going through his mind, and what are his plans now?
He's actually rather upset that she was so easily able to slip into power, given her aspirations, at least as relayed by her child. He has it in his mind to look into what the other Canaanites of the city are doing, including his side, to see if anyone else has plans to try to wrest Praxis from this woman. All in the name of the Covenant, of course. Although, secretly, he's wondering how much further the city could be destabilized.
So in this montage of seeing the Gauntlet leaving as a group down the hallway, we pan from Cormac to Robert de Vere. What are Robert's thoughts now, seeing the successor to his grandsire?
He doesn't like it at all. He's keeping up appearances for the situation, but the whole situation does have him in a foul mood.
We move to Thomas Chamberlain as you walk with the rest of the Gauntlet. Where's Thomas at?
Thomas is rolling over plans in his head, plans for the meeting with the Primogen Council, plans for potentially meeting with the broader populace of Lincoln in as much as he can manage. There's a very particular way he would very much like for those meetings with the Primogen to play out. And he's very carefully trying to word that just the right way so as not to sound improper, for lack of a...
And lastly, Elenid. What are Elenid's thoughts on this meeting and the plans going forward?
Elenid, she's looking at it from a much more practical thing. Person is beneficial towards the Covenant, then they should be able to keep that title. Interest, or at least their child has expressed interest in destabilizing a couple. Back when he was in power, so whether or not is yet to be seen.
Yeah, you are cutting in and out a little bit, but to generally summarize, she's looking at it very practically as to how best to stabilize the city and the Covenant as a whole, regardless of any emotional feelings of the opportunism here.
Precisely, and the question that role.
So the group of you, with these thoughts in mind, continue on, and eventually you leave the tower that once was held by Jean Marc. It's a cold night out. Many of the kind still awake, walking through, are bundled up in whatever furs they've been able to collect, whatever cloth they've been able to wrap themselves in. You have some time by yourself as the doors close behind you. You are back in the streets, just outside the tower. scene is yours.
That one's going to be trouble.
Whether or not she's legitimized, yes.
Do you think that it's in our best interest that she's not?
I'd rather not bandy about unfounded theories just yet. I'd rather have a look at that site, see what we can find, maybe get a better feel for which way the wind is blowing here in Lincoln.
That is the preferable task at this moment.
I'd have said least distasteful, but as you like.
But yes, I do hope there is another more worthy to choose from.
Keep in mind, if she's been making plans like this for some time, it's possible she's already bought the support of the rest of the Primogen.
A likely scenario.
I suppose it is too early to be making judgments. She's ambitious, but that's hardly novel in an elder.
Nor, unfortunately, is it grounds for criminal accusations.
She might be good for this city. At the very least, she doesn't seem paranoid.
She's well connected, capable, pragmatic, thoughtful. So why don't I like her? And he'll begin ambling towards the stables to collect his horse.
I know why. Because she reminds you of you. And he'll grin.
There's one key difference. If I were going to conspire to overthrow a prince, I certainly wouldn't tell anyone.
We all make mistakes.
Speaking of which, how was Bella's gala?
There's a lot of it I don't remember. But I seem to recall having fun.
Tom grins a little bit, kind of sideways.
She must have thrown quite the party if you cannot recall.
Debaucherous. Lecherous. Exciting.
So precisely the kind of get-together you rather enjoy.
Never been to one before. But I like novel experiences. I did get to know a few people better than I thought I might.
Tom averts his face just a little bit and hides a broad grin.
By now you've reached the stables and are starting to rein the horses and saddle them, getting them ready to ride.
Were we meant to have a guide to this field of battle?
Out of character, you were told that it was on a road heading east, kind of in an eastern direction from the city toward the Lincolnshire wolds, which is kind of an open, uncultivated land mixed with the woods and light forests. And by description, it sounded like if you follow the road, you'll find the scene.
So then, no. Okay. Tom will swing easily up into the saddle and then rein his horse back to wait for the others.
Cormac mounts Gauntlet somewhat gracefully.
Eager to move on, Robert will be the next to mount a steed.
Looking at the horses, do we really have to take those?
As you ask the question, another rider comes up from the direction of the tower, and you see Colton Sardini on top of it. He pulls up alongside the two of you, kind of pulling the horse to a stop. I thought I might lend my hand in guiding you. Of course, it is quite a simple direction, but Lady Everly insisted I be of any service possible. It was my messenger that first found the site, after all. Perhaps I may answer questions.
Perhaps you may at that.
The first one being, how did he happen to stumble upon it?
Chance. Nothing more than chance. A courier coming in came across the scene and reported into me.
And to answer Elena's question, I would expect Gertrude has already taken the wagon on to Robert's estate. Your option at that point is walking, riding yourself, or riding with one of us.
Alright, Sarah's gonna reboot, and she's going to ride with one of you for now.
Animals.
Don't even know what you said. I'm gonna take it as an agreement. Go ahead and reboot. So the group of you follow Colton Sardini, riding off into the night, eastern, out of the city, through the gates, and up towards the Lincolnshire wolds. It's not a very far ride, maybe a couple hours before you pierce through the wolds and get into more of the forested area. There is a bit of a hill you must climb, and so some of the scenery is a bit hidden. But when you crest the top of the hill, continuing on, you enter the forest and you see a toppled carriage, mostly destroyed. There are dead bodies bearing the livery of Jean Marc everywhere, a triple Pegasus on display. Some of these men have died off the road and in the woods a short distance away from the carriage. Based on the armor, they look like his knights. Swords and spears lay on the ground and pierce into the soil.
Cormac, for his part, looks very angry now. They weren't even given a proper burial. What is the meaning of this?
I believe Lady Everly was attempting to preserve the scene for proper examination first.
Indeed, my lord. I'm afraid such macabre topics are perhaps not to the standard of the Christian Church, but it is to the highest advantage for investigation.
I don't know that I necessarily agree, but at worst it's a minor faux pas. But as you say, it is advantageous for our purpose.
Let us search the bodies for the causes of death, whether by claw or weapon, and see if we can suss out a culprit, and then we'll bury them ourselves.
Colton looks a bit nervously into the sky. Perhaps we might let some of the men do that. And you do see that also in the area there are a number of men, knights of similar livery that you've seen that escorted you into the tower. Likely Eden Everly's men. Some of them look very tired.
Afraid to get your hands dirty and give good men a night's rests. Hey, Colt.
It is their purpose to serve and protect. They protected the site. Now they may serve and aid in the burial. He smiles.
Some of them look ready to fall over where they stand. We can handle the burials.
He looks again to the sky. As you say.
Do you worry for a dawn that is not yet coming?
I am sure you will work quickly.
Why is haste a factor now?
You would realize that after a couple hours of riding out here and knowing it will take a couple hours to get back, it is getting a bit later into the night. You will be cutting it close, even if you don't bury them.
Then we'll do what we can. Let the men rest for a while and they can finish what we don't.
But first, let's see what the stone will tell us. And Tom's going to have a look around. Mostly he's looking for signs of opposing hoof tracks, where the attackers would have struck from.
And for his part, Cormac is looking for the less obvious things, like the claw marks of giant beasts.
Robert will look for the remains of his grandsire.
Alright. As the group of you begins investigation, I'm going to have us pause and see if we can get Sarah back in before we get much further.
Sweet.
Yeah, I was hoping. there's an icon that makes me believe that.
Yes, I am.
Yay!
I was gonna eat the shepherd's pie now. Go away, Sarah. No, I wasn't serious, guys. Shit.
What have you done? He was only kidding. Don't actually go away.
I know I was kidding.
I figured that, but it was funnier my way.
Okay. You need more time, sir?
The connection seems stable.
You sound better.
Oh, I'm back. Sorry.
Robert here?
I
Alright. And we will get back into it. So, Elenid, you rode with the Gauntlet east out of the city, following Colton Sardini. And it wasn't very far before you reached the wolds east of the city in Lincolnshire, this kind of uncultivated land, and reached the woods at the middle of it. And it was in this area that you came across this scene, this toppled carriage that's been broken and battered, dead bodies that show the triple Pegasus of Jean Marc scattered around. Some of them have died near the carriage, some died off the road in the woods, and they appear to be his knights. There are scattered weapons here and there, and it does seem that this area is secured by men who seem to serve Eden Everly based on their own livery. A number of torches have been planted and lanterns here and there to provide some light. And the men here look utterly exhausted, some of them leaning on their spears to stay awake, bloodshot eyes. They're probably, many of them have been working almost day and night for the last 2 weeks it's taken for everyone to get here. And so the group is beginning their investigation. What does Elena do?
Well, first thing she does, as soon as that horse is slow enough to get off of, she will vacate that horse. After doing so, she will carefully walk around, making sure not to step on anything that would potentially be useful to their investigation, and take a look around, seeing what she finds.
Okay, so there's more than one way to skin a cat or investigate a slaughter. So some of the Gauntlet is taking specific methods to investigate or different focuses. Does Elenid have any focus for how she wants to investigate? Or any aspect in particular to look
Can I
for?
tell how the other Gauntlet members are going about this?
We can just repeat ourselves.
Yeah, go ahead and repeat yourselves.
Cormac is looking for the signs of animals. He's checking for the presence of lupines, particularly.
Tom is obviously looking at the signs of approach to try and identify how many riders and at what angle they attacked.
Robert's first going to look for the remains of his sire. Upon finding them, he may look at other options of investigation.
What of the weapons here? Are the only remaining weapons on the battlefield belonging to Jean Marc's men, or are there weapons that belong to a different group here?
The only banners you see here are of Jean Marc's. Otherwise, it's swords and spears and axes, some pierced into the soil and some just scattered around. It's difficult to say if some of the unmarked blades belong to other people or not. They all look mundane enough.
I think what she's trying to get at is, does the number of abandoned weapons match up with the number of bodies currently?
Roughly, it seems to, yes.
All right. Outside of that, she would like to see if there's any footprints around, just get a gauge for how many men were in fact here. Aside from that, she would rather get a overview.
An overview of the attack?
Yes. As
Okay.
best she can.
Alright, so we'll start with Cormac, looking at the scene with an angle to look for any signs of maybe lupines. I'll have you make a... let's see here. You don't have any occult, but I will let you make a perception animal can to look for some of the more animalistic or feral signs of battle, the signs of a conflict not fought with men, at least. And that will be a difficulty 7. Zero successes. It's difficult to say. These men, some of them are mutilated. The bodies, not all of them are whole. Not to say that they're missing, but there's enough carnage here that it's difficult to say if there were animals involved or not. Maybe there were men and wolves or attack dogs. You're not sure what was involved here beyond a lot of bloodshed. And Tom, you were looking at this from the angle of how many assailants and maybe the direction they attacked from.
Let's see if I can't spot like the nature of the approach and hoof prints or footprints or what have.
I'll take a perception enigmas roll. Difficulty 7.
Why not investigation?
You could do investigation too. That's fine.
You said 7?
Yes. 2 successes. All right. You find something strange when you're trying to deduce how many more assailants. You're not seeing many footprints or horse prints, or hoof prints I should say, from maybe the outlying areas. It doesn't look like anyone attacked them. You just see the bodies. You don't see the marks of a marching force charging in from any direction. There is no angle. They just died. Some of them obviously moved around. You can see the footprints in the middle where there was some battle. It's almost like they fought each other or something else happened. There's no outside evidence of a group converging on them.
Oh my.
Next we have Robert. I'll have you make a perception investigation also. You're looking specifically for Jean Marc, so I'll also have you do difficulty 7.
Okay.
To find this one man amidst the carnage.
Would heightened senses sight help here at all?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
3 successes. Okay. You do find very close, actually propped up against this broken carriage, a very fine set of a black doublet and hose with gold trim, encapsulating this messy pile of bones and ash and old bloodstains that have somewhat been smeared into the wood behind this form, mixed in with the mud. There is a well-deteriorated skull very close by, which seems to have been severed off, the mouth widely agape and fangs extended. The right arm of the doublet is gone, ripped at the sleeve. You recognize the doublet. You've seen Jean Marc wear it.
I'll go to the corpse and kneel by it, examining the scene closely. Is there his recognized weapon near him?
I would say with your familiarity, you've seen him have this very decorative, almost bejeweled short sword. It's almost like a long dagger, which he has held. And you do see it around the waistband, strapped.
Like it was never drawn?
It was never drawn, although you do see his sword was drawn, and you recognize the sword as well, which is also a fine steel blade that you recognize based on the ornate handle and the pommel, and that was drawn. It's not very far from the corpse.
He'll walk over to the sword, grasp it, and try to open his third eye to it using Spirit's Touch.
Interesting. Alright, give me one moment. Alright, I'll have you roll Perception, Empathy. The difficulty here is going to be 8. So obviously Auspex is not going to lower this difficulty. Two successes. And as I understand it, this gives you information on the last owner. Is that correct?
I guess it does. Well, I guess that wouldn't be... Now I'm reading it, like it's not as useful as I thought it would be.
Well, let's see. Look at it and review it. So you can read or otherwise experience the traces attached to the object.
I guess what was done with it recently was his main concern.
Alright, so 2 successes. What happens when you grasp this blade and you try to focus on the last owner and maybe the last moments, you get a hazy image, kind of a blurred image. There's sound, but it's distorted. It sounds like men screaming, but they sound distant and tormented, as though from a distant hallway, and you think there's fire, but you're not sure if that's just some artifact of this vision. It's very brief, and you see this clouded image, a hand, an arm clasping the sword. It's pale. It's wearing this black doublet with the golden trim, and you see zoomed in at the hand as it's holding this blade and strikes at a figure. You think perhaps a woman, and the blade cuts at the woman, and you only know that it's a woman because you can see where the blade hits. It's just below the breast, and she seems to be very thinly clad in some kind of light garment, and despite how fast this blade seems to strike her, it does not pierce her skin, although it does cut away at some of the cloth, and her pale flesh is exposed. And just as quickly as the blade connects, another hand, perhaps her own, comes down in a swipe, and the arm is severed and the blade drops. And that is when this vision ends. It's only maybe 2 or 3 seconds long.
Robert will be still as he takes this moment in. He'll stand up, taking the sword with him, and look to see how the others are faring.
As you're doing that, Elenid is also examining the scene of the battle and looking for footprints and numbers, kind of an overview of the battle.
Actually, can I revise? I thought of something smarter to do since someone was already looking for footprints.
Absolutely. What do you look for?
More specifically, if there are traces of people trying to hide that they were there. Smudging their footprints using branches and such, the typical trying to minimize traces of them there tactic.
Okay, do you have any enigmas?
No. No, I do not. I have survival, I have investigation, I have occult.
Survival would be appropriate here. I'll have you do a perception survival, difficulty 7.
Oh no.
It's not a botch, but no successes. You find a confusing scene when you start to look for evidence of hiding or the concealing of movement. You find an area where some of these men seem to have died in the foliage and the brush surrounding the center of the attack. And at first you think maybe they were fleeing, but there are branches broken around them and their necks seem dark, as though something was around them, and you're not sure what it means, but it does confuse you.
So, I have a theory. There's 2 possible things that stand up to me. Either, well, I'll just say this out loud in character. Either they turned on each other, or some force rose up from their midst and struck them down.
Let's talk about the latter over here. And she gestures towards the men in the brush with the dark rings around their neck.
Tom will, of course, amble over.
Cormac is well interested now.
And you also see that there are a few men kind of in this collection of trees where they seem to have died beneath. And there are some broken branches around them, and you see these wounds. Do any of you have medicine? I don't think any of you do, but anyone except for Elenid who failed the roll can make a perception enigmas on this if you have enigmas.
I don't have enigmas.
I do.
Alright, for a perception enigmas, standard difficulty if you have enigmas. One success. So it's something of a riddle to solve. And putting the pieces together, Cormac, with some of your knowledge, this looks familiar to you. You have seen men who died from hanging. They have a similar darkness around their neck. And you put the pieces together, seeing these broken branches, and look up, and indeed there are broken branches higher up in these trees, consistent in about the size that these branches make.
Look, he says, pointing up to the branches above. They were hung.
So they were.
It's consistent with the marks around their neck, where the blood has risen to the surface of the flesh. I think I saw something about that in that book of ours.
If I look around, are there any ropes or something that would tie into them being hung?
You don't see anything like that.
Tom's gonna go in for a closer look. If there was enough force there to leave that kind of a mark, maybe there's a wear pattern to match something that looks like the weave of a rope.
Sure. I'll give you a perception investigation. It would be better if you had medicine, so it's going to be a higher difficulty. I'll put it at 8. You think you do see the weave pattern as though from a hanging rope.
But where would the rope have gone?
It's not like the hangman to take the rope with him when he's done.
And why? If you were to take it with you, what purpose would it serve? The evidence is all around you.
All of you looking at these bodies make a wits alertness. Difficulty 7.
Yes, that is a bot.
Alright, Cormac, you're fascinated by the boots. You think there's something about the boots that's worth investigating. Thomas, Robert, and Elenid, you all look one after another. None of these men with these wounds around their neck ever drew their swords.
Perhaps they were bait.
But to what end? Jean Marc doesn't seem the sort who's prone to such an altruistic act as to pull off to the side of the road to help several hanged men.
Cormac, meanwhile, is investigating their boots. He doesn't even know why.
That doesn't change that these men were hanged in his domain.
These men were strangled in his domain. There are a great many things that can break branches overhead.
There's quite a bit about this that does not make sense.
Question for you, ST guy. Can I get, or do I have enough information to justify a perception occult roll or a intelligence occult roll or some kind of occult roll to determine whether or not obtenebration was used here?
When has Thomas or Judith seen obtenebration used?
That's a
when we were running away from the werewolves.
That's true.
More specifically, Ellen had used the shadow tentacles and the shadow cloud thing. I don't remember the exact name.
It's true. And so you're looking for evidence that that was somehow used here?
Yep. It's the only other thing that makes sense besides dominate.
Let me make a wits occult roll, difficulty 9. You are not familiar with this.
Does the information enough Nimtet gave Robert be of any use in this situation?
What in specific?
I don't think anything specifically was said. I do recall asking him what would signs of the occult be, or what he was looking for.
Yeah, as I recall, he did give you a few things to look out for, generally, kind of vaguely. First, Thomas, spend a willpower to save yourself from a botch. Unfortunately, you're not familiar enough with the power or the signs of combat, making use of that power to really tell if that was or wasn't. You really can't rule it out either way. Robert, based on what Anaf Nemtet told you, and especially given what you experienced in your vision, there was an element of the supernatural in this attack, clearly. And do you have a cult? You have a cult, right?
No.
In this instance, I'll let you temporarily use Anaf Nemtet's advice, and so you can, for this roll, use a dot of occult and make an intelligence occult difficulty 8. Try and pick out more details of the supernatural element of this battle. And Cormac, there's something unique about this battle which you alone might pick up on, and so I will have you make a perception awareness, standard difficulty. Meanwhile, Robert, unfortunately, despite enough Nemtet's advice, things to look for, You're not really sure what to make of this scene. It's very confusing. He did say that if something like this, something supernatural and inexplicable came up, he would be willing to look at it, but you yourself are not familiar enough with the occult arts to really determine what might have happened here.
Tom, however, not missing a beat, knowing his own failings pretty well, is going to turn to Elenid. You know these things better than I. Does this look like one of your blood might have had a hand in it?
I can certainly check.
Right, Elenid, you can make a... What was the roll I gave you? Wits Occult?
Yep.
Alright, Wits Occult, standard difficulty for you. And meanwhile, Cormac, 1 success. So you alone have an uncomfortable familiarity with this. The more time you spend around this, you feel on a preternatural level without really having the words. The aura of death in this place reminds you of your past, though you are unsure why.
No specialty on that, but that's obscenely higher.
We'll go to Cormac first as he's making this revelation. There is something very familiar about this.
He stands up from the bodies and looks around. It's not safe for us here. Something about this speaks true. Canaanites with control of the very plants. The vision is hazy.
Control of the plants.
Don't ask me to explain further. The memory is not good. But we should not be here.
And you wish to leave the corpses?
No. As I said, it's just a feeling. But at least you can say I've warned you.
No, this was done by K-Knight or supernatural in a humanoid form, not lupines. I had a vision when handling my grandsire's weapon. A woman wearing... It's difficult to make out, a gown.
What color was her hair?
You didn't see. Your vision was very focused, almost zoomed in to where the blade struck at her side. And it was an odd-looking gown. It did not look English or even really Western. Not necessarily Eastern, it was just foreign. Maybe piecemealed together.
Like patched together?
Possibly. Or homemade somehow.
I could not make out that sort of detail. The vision was solely on where the blade struck. But the dress she was wearing was unique, perhaps patched together by her own hand. Very wild.
Well, that rules out at least one.
And Elenid, with your 6 successes, there's nothing here to suggest any obtenebration was used.
Unfortunately, it seems like your hunch about it being one of my blood is not accurate. There are no signs of generation here.
Whoever did this had the power to rip my grandsire's arm clean off with a swipe.
And that enacts in Cormac another vision of a wolf's head flying out of the darkness to land at his feet. He shudders visibly.
The very wolves came to life and destroyed them all.
It is not outside the realm of possibility.
Given all we've seen, I'm ruling nothing out. But, at the very least, we can report back to the Covenant that it was not foul play on the part of anyone in Lincoln.
Agreed.
I have never heard of a bloodline with power over plants.
I'm not even sure there is such a thing. I just can't remember. I convinced myself over and over again to forget.
As you're talking, you hear hoof prints as Colton starts riding back up through you. Well, my lords, any progress? Are we ready to go?
We're ready. The one question lingers. If the responsible party has been here for some time, as I would expect they must have been, why only now attack? Surely the opportunity had presented itself previously. This can't have been the first time Jean Marc rode through these woods.
Something was done
Unless
to
they have a newly found ally or some evidence was planted.
The woods here are known to belong to any other entities.
Robert, you being the most familiar with Lincolnshire, you would note they are not. Roughly, or generally, they belong to the Count of Lincoln, but otherwise, they're not the domain or hunting ground of any Canaanites that you're aware of.
I can think of no.
Go ahead.
I can think of no Canaanites that laid claim other than Jean Marc.
Tom has another thought. Is there any sign of Cornelius?
Make another perception investigation. Difficulty 7. Now that you spend some time around the field, it's a little bit more familiar now. But you're still trying to find one man.
Cormac is going to climb the tree with the broken branches.
Tom, you're not finding any signs of Cornelius. You do find whom you believe might have been Sir Reynald. You see a man wearing the same armor you saw in court, although the head is gone, and he's holding a sword which is sundered above the hilt. The same sword that you parried away. Cormac, you're trying to climb one of the trees where one of these branches broke? Or just any
Yes. No, the tree where the branches are broken.
tree? I'll take Dexterity Athletics. Standard difficulty. They're good for climbing.
If it's obvious that Thomas went to Reynaud, Robert will move towards Reynaud's body as well. He figures it's worth a shot to at least try. He'll also attempt Spirit's Touch on the broken blade.
Alright, I will have you do another perception empathy. Difficulty will be 7. Alright, do you have any specialties there?
In this case, I do not believe so. It'd only be for empathy, and no.
No, I'm going to say no. 3 successes, though, still. That's good information. And again, you immerse yourself in a cloudy and hazed vision. It's not fully visible what's happening. There's chaos. You know that. There's more of the yells. Somewhere in the distance, you can see men behind Reynaud. For you see Reynaud, you see his face screwed up in fear and anger. The men behind him somewhere running away, the blade's not even drawn. And Sir Reynaud is holding this blade against something. You can't see what. You see only him from the foot of someone. And the blade snaps as he tries to draw it across some figure in front of him out of view. The vision ends.
There's no way to tell what the blade snapped against, what body part or anything of that nature.
You see him initially parrying as these men running behind him. He's parrying something and then draws it back again to swing at something out of view. And you just see the blade come back across, broken above the hilt. And that's when it begins to cloud again and you don't see anymore.
Noted.
Cormac, you're doing very well climbing up this tree where one of these branches broke above one of the men who seemed to have died from something happening to their neck.
He's looking closer for any sign of ropes that might have been tied around one of these branches. Although if they've broken off, he may not find anything. He also wants to see if there's any wildlife up here who has made a nest in this tree.
Take a perception, survival, standard difficulty. Alright, 2 successes. No, there are no signs that rope was here. Of course, as you pointed out, the branch is broken. There's no other evidence that rope was left behind or ever used here. And you do not see any evidence that wildlife was nesting up here at all. Although it's not unnatural, you do hear the sound of wildlife generally around you. It's not unnaturally quiet.
Possibly the last search Robert will do. He'll try to attune himself to the supernatural of the area, just to see if anything stands out that would draw his attention.
Alright. Wait, perception, awareness, difficulty 7. Is there anything in particular occult you're trying to detect?
Mainly an object, if there's any object in the area.
Two successes. You don't find any unnatural blades or weapon craft of any kind left behind, but when you try to sense with your sixth sense, with your auspex, reaching out to feel what doesn't belong here, the only thing that really draws you is these trees. The trees that seem to have these broken branches. There's something about them, like they've been touched or interacted in some unnatural way at some point, maybe in the past. You just get this eerie feeling from them when you try to focus.
Okay, then. To fully abuse Spirit's touch, Robert will suddenly fixate on the trees, walking slowly, and place a hand on them, seeing if he could sense anything from them.
Sure. Perception, empathy, difficulty 7. Alright, 2 successes. You're becoming more familiar with what it feels like to fade from this sight and enmesh yourself in these visions, clouded and uncertain as they are. You see these trees on a night. You're not sure if it's the same night of the attack. You distantly hear more of these chaotic sounds somewhere beneath. You're kind of looking up in the canopy of the trees, and there's some conflict beneath as you hear the shouts and yells, and you hear this strange, almost cracking wood, kind of this wooden bending sound, as though wood creaking, as these trees seem to move. These branches seem to extend unnaturally. And you don't see what they do, you just see the branches almost elongating in some ways. And you just hear more screams below as more of this cracking sound happens. And the vision fades.
Robert will look absolutely confused as he withdraws his hand from the tree. If anyone's in the area, he will mention what he has seen.
Cormac's still in the tree. Go ahead.
Something supernatural. Without a doubt, these trees, their limbs, they extended. I can't quite tell. But these trees were manipulated to act in such a manner.
Cormac grits his teeth and jumps down from his high branch, landing with a soft thud.
That settles it. I'm satisfied to report what we found.
Yes, and if they are indeed still around, and I don't see why they wouldn't be with their control over the very forest that surrounds us, we should likely head back soon.
The fact that we haven't been attacked tells me that de Martinique did something to offend them. In any case, Master Sardini,
Perhaps one of their own was put to death during that lockdown. But this is merely speculation. We have no way of being certain.
Yes, I am satisfied with what we found. Let us tend to these bodies and be away from here quickly.
Unfortunately, we lack the time for that. You were going to say something, Corn.
yes, Master Sardini, it'd be in your best interest to have a word with your mistress, not to let any Canaanites into these woods for the foreseeable future.
I would also advise sending fresh men to relieve these soldiers and bringing the bodies of the fallen back for proper Christian burial.
Yes, of course. We will send for whatever rights these men would have wanted. Let us be on our way back to the city. Shall we?
Fresh men, Sardini.
Yes, of course, the freshmen.
If I have to send my own guard to do it, you'll know why.
He forces a smile as he turns his horse and yells out some commands to some of the men around. And he starts riding off back in the direction of Lincoln.
Tom saddles up. Can't abide a lazy steward.
Are there any horses that were left behind? Or are they all dead too?
Now that you mention it, you do not see any horse corpses at all.
He can only imagine what was done with them, and he shudders again. A very human action.
Let me make a perception. You can do survival or animal, Ken. Either would be applicable. Difficulty is 6 now that you're focusing on it. Two successes. So when you begin to look for the horses, look for bodies, and you see that none of them have obviously died, you notice that the reins to the horses that were carrying this carriage look in good condition. They actually look like they were untied manually.
Just a moment now. Before mounting Gringolet, he will approach some of these reins. Look at this, would you?
What is it?
The horses weren't killed where they stood. They were untied.
So they have an affinity for creatures as well as plants and animals. They are truly the denizens of the wilderness.
What this means is this was not a frame job. No one manufactured this assault. I expect the Tremor have manifold powers that could mimic something like this, but would they have taken the care to avoid harming the horses and then setting them free?
I know well enough what a crime of passion looks like. And that's what we're seeing here.
Do you know of what could have done this?
No clue? He shrugs, although his smile is only half what it was before, as he mounts Gringlet.
Well, you certainly have more information than any of us.
As I said, the memories are long buried. Unless you can dredge them up, they might remain that way.
Perhaps enough Nemtet would know more.
Any road, Master Sardini is right to worry now. We should get back before the sun rises.
Yes, we should. And Elened will get on whomever's horse she rode over.
I would say probably riding with Robert since he's the smallest.
Perhaps.
All right. The group of you mount up in the midst of this grisly scene and begin riding off back in the direction of the city of Lincoln. And as you do, the scene fades on the group of you riding back down the hill away from this forest and away from the carnage. And as the scene fades, we will take a break a little bit early and come back in about 15 minutes.
Sweet!
All right.
Oh, cheesy.
I said sweet.
For sure.
Watarimashita.
What the?
Ah, good old weeb speak.
Whoa, hateful.
I'm definitely
Okay,
not.
weeb is an endearing word.
I mean, it's self-insulting to myself as well, so...
All going according to plan.
Everyone's here. Does this mean we're starting again?
Are we all here?
Yes.
Oh, good. Then we'll get back into it.
Was that video somehow tied into Portal? Other than the music and iconography?
And the voice, J.K. Simmons, was the guy who voiced Cave Johnson in
Was there a Cave Johnson in Portal? I don't even remember.
Portal 2. A lot of pre-recorded mess.
Oh, I didn't play that one. That's
I
cool.
only
Though.
played the co-op mode of that.
Okay.
All right, enough of these Philistines.
The four of you, just behind Colt and Sardini, return to the city of Lincoln, and with not much time to spare, as the increasing blue color of the sky does give you some concern as you get close to the city walls. Will you be going to Robert's Manor, or will you stay at the Lincoln Tower?
Do we have enough time to get to Robert's Manor?
Yes.
Is that where I sent Gautier? I can't remember.
Yes, I believe Gertrude and Gautier are off at Robert's Manor.
Alright, that's where he'll go.
Yep. Gonna go meet up with the ghouls.
And that's where Robert's going to.
You do not have much time to debrief as you arrive just with enough time to reach your chambers before the sun forces you all into sleep for the day. But quickly enough, the day seems to pass, as it does seem to be shorter during the winter. And you all, in time, rise for the next evening. And one by one, end up in the foyer at the front of Robert's Manor. So the four of you are back together. The scene is yours.
I trust everyone has rested well.
Thankfully, nightmares are a distant memory.
For my part, I slept like the dead.
I am fairly certain all of us could use that terminology.
Shall we get to business then?
Naturally.
Then what we've made of this investigation of the battlefield?
I would suggest sending messenger to Old Sarum to notify the rest of the Gauntlet that Jean Marc met his end at the hands of an independent Cainite of some power, best left alone. I can't imagine how he managed to offend whatever the creature was, but I wouldn't waste the manpower trying to drive it out of the woods.
If I had to guess, the offending Cainite entered his domain, of which he made a strict ruling.
To his peril.
Alas, I doubt he could foresee such an unknown force intervening. This timing is all very poor.
That leaves our second part of our mission, trying to find out who all is trying to claim Praxis, if there are any that are rivaling the current claimant.
It was our plan to meet with the Primogen, was it not?
I expect them to assemble tomorrow. Tonight, I was hoping if we might speak to those not regularly finding themselves sitting on a cushion.
Well, who did you have in mind?
Actually, I thought this might be a good first step for Roberts. He's a known face in the area. Will likely have established rapport with certain individuals already. Have an easier time taking stock of the situation on the ground.
What you say is true.
You also have a vested interest in the well-being of Lincoln, which means you'll have a more critical eye than I might, or Cormac might.
I will be watching the new candidates very closely.
Shall we make for Elysium then?
Unless
I
there are any
defer-
other concerns.
I defer to Robert on this particular point. Do you feel like you need the weight of the entire Gauntlet assembled? Surely 4 sets of ears can listen more closely than just one, but
Did you have any other concerns to attend to?
not before meeting with Primogen, no.
It would lend more gravity to the situation and perhaps a more even view if the grandsire of the late prince was not the only one to pass judgment.
We're going to pass judgment.
Well, at least promises of recommendation.
Much as I'd like to leave it in the hands of the Primogen to take stock of their own clan, I don't know how many will be represented in Elysium. Never mind how many will be actually questioned, and whether or not those opinions will be taken into account by the Primogen when they cast their vote. Besides Elysium, is there anywhere else we might find someone skulking? I know there are a great many people in London who aren't regular attendees.
My sire, de Barsham, will likely still be at de Martinique's estate.
If they know of this meeting, I suspect they would be there, but... And Robert will think, is there any other known gathering spots or perhaps Primogen that would not attend Elysium?
As you recall, Elysium was held at a fairly stuffy...
The Primogen will be in attendance whether they like it or not. They want their voices heard, they'll be present tomorrow. Not worried about seeking them out.
Oh, I was muted. As you recall, Elysium was once held at a fairly stuffy area, which was more of a salon to the upper class, the gentry and aristocracy, and didn't fit very well with many of the neonates here. But you know that there was another location that was informally in Elysium, the Coach and Horse Inn, the kind of tavern where you've actually performed at with your sire, and you know that some of the neonates go there sometimes, as well as Killian.
Yes, the Primogen would mainly be gathered at Elysium, though That Elysium does not suit the flavors of everyone. There was another one, a more casual place. Many of the neonates would attend this location.
Excellent.
And Robert,
Why don't-
as sorry to interrupt. Robert, as being a local here, you would also know a lot more. There isn't really an official Primogen Council here. There are only a handful of true elders that were beyond Jean Marc. There was a Malkavian by the name of Abba, but he died in the early 1400s to witch hunters that had been coming through the area. And other than him, there were really only 3 true elders. One was the Cainite, which you already knew about. Eden Everly was likely the eldest after Jean Marc, whom you knew had connections and contacts in local kind. You knew about Hugh de Balsam, the priest and once advisor to Jean Marc. And the last elder, except for the now destroyed Malkavian, was a man by the name of Cortes de Iruña, whom little was known about except that he held an estate just outside the city walls, about half a mile north of the city, and had become something of a recluse. And that's really the summation of the elders in Lincoln, now that Jean Marc is gone.
There is no formal Primogen Council, but there remains 3 outstanding elders, and Robert will relay what he recalls.
Then I would suggest that you and Elenid attend the Elysium. Cormac and I will mingle among the younger.
And Elenid, since you heard Robert give out this information, and you also heard this name, Cortes de Iruña, you can make an intelligence politics roll, difficulty 7. You might recognize this name. Three successes. You recall your sire, Valanus, speaking of Cortes de Iruña. He's a La Sombra, and he's roughly the equivalent through Vitae of being the uncle to Valanus, so your great-uncle. Apparently he had 2 children, and Valanus had remarked on them in the past, not knowing a whole lot about them except of their existence somewhere in Lincoln. So he is at least somewhat known to you.
She pauses for a minute at hearing the name and goes, huh. Hold on for a minute. You said Cortez, did you not?
That I did.
That I have personally never met the man, but apparently he's my great uncle of sorts. Bloodline lineage, of course.
Do you know much about him? He is quite a recluse.
No, I've only briefly heard about him from my sire.
I almost wonder if he'll even show up. But those are the 3 main candidates.
But he is Perhaps my going will encourage him to show up, if he receives a word at least.
Very good. Then it sounds like our night is planned.
All right. So the group of you depart from Robert's Manor, splitting off. And to summarize, Robert and Elenid are going to the tavern to look for the neonates, the coach and horse inn.
Robert and Elenid are going to Elysium.
Oh, okay.
Tom and Cormac are going to the coach and
Okay. All right. So we follow Robert and Elenid to Elysium. As they enter this salon somewhat early in the evening, as winter does provide some earlier hours, there are still noblemen and noblewomen who are keeping some late company. Perhaps some of these nobles have mistresses. You suspect at least some of what's going on here is such dalliances. I'll have you both make an appearance etiquette roll to blend into this society.
Standard difficulty?
Yes.
I know this is shooting myself in the foot, but do I have a higher difficulty because she is typically dressed in plainer clothes?
I am going to give you a higher difficulty for that, now that you mention it. And it is shooting yourself in the foot, but it is good roleplay also.
Guess since it's mentioned, what does status give me?
Status is more of a Cainite measure, a measure of your status in Cainite society. If you have influence, that'd be more along the lines of mortal society or fame. Do you have either of those?
I should have status with Lincoln, and I do.
Then your status, specifically your status with Lincoln, you could use that in an engagement, a social engagement with a local Cainite of Lincoln. For this, someone will restrict you just to appearance etiquette.
Wait, could you repeat the mechanics again?
I'll just have you roll appearance etiquette for this.
Okay.
So standard for you, 7 for Elenid. Alright, I know you have some courtly manners, so that's going to be 6 successes for Robert. And 1 success for Elenid. So Robert, you're much more practiced and at home, quite literally, here in Lincoln, in the courts, in the social circles of the higher-ups and the betters, the upper class. And not only does no one bats an eye at your appearance here, you draw some looks, even some smiles. It seems that your appearance alone maybe adds to some of the affirmation that some of these people have that they are better. If people like you are showing up, they're in the right place. Elenid, you scrape by with one success. You get a couple looks. No one's outright stopping you from entering. You just get less of a warm welcome than Robert, although it does help to be at his side. Although you're not on his arm, so it's not quite as useful.
Her simple brown and white dress with the gray cloak she likes to wear.
Mostly what you see in this salon are kind, quietly socializing, sharing wine and small meals together. You do see in the corner of this room a face that I know Robert would recognize. I don't know if Elenid would. It's an older man, obviously clergy based on the heavy robes he wears and this kind of red sash down his shoulders. He seems to be speaking quietly with one of the men in the corner, who seems distraught about something, and you recognize this is Hugh de Balsam, Robert. And he kind of looks at you in between speaking with the man. You otherwise don't recognize any Canaanites here right now.
No other big names yet. In that case, Robert will, with a smile, approach you.
He gives a pat to this well-dressed man who still looks a bit distraught and turns. Seeing you, he almost looks embarrassed and makes a wide berth to avoid you and starts walking in a different direction, Robert. But Hugh looks at you with a calm smile as you approach. Is Elenid going with him?
Of course, she knows no one here.
Lord Robert de Vere, good evening again. It is good to see you.
Good evening, and it is good to see a friendly face.
Is my child near, then?
Indeed, he is. He was concerned about you, so it is good to see that you are well.
Yes, I am well, despite how the city has fared in recent nights. Come, let us speak away from this crowd.
Of course. Lead the way.
He continues on through a doorway into a smaller chamber. There's a fireplace and a cozy couch that's sat in front of it. It seems like a small study. And the two of you walk in on some lord and another well-dressed woman embraced close, and their faces very close to each other. And they seem to part as they see the group of you enter. And they make a quick exit out another door. It seems this place has become something of a den for infidelity.
Indeed. Who has taken control of maintaining the place?
He sits down on the couch, and fortunately the fire is quite low right now. Lincoln is ruled by Lady Everly now, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, she has been the first to take the initiative, but is this control uncontested?
It is. She is the first and the only to lay claim. None dare oppose her, I imagine.
Including yourself.
I have no desire for praxis. He says, looking into the flames. You saw what it brought, Jean Marc. For that I am sorry for your loss. He looks away from the flame to you.
Yes, a great loss. Do you know much of that night?
Precious little, and I'm sure you know more by now. Lord Barbaros was in the city, but he left as the news broke here.
As we have heard.
Horrific. He nods a couple of times, looking down.
More so than we initially thought.
Truly. I know not exactly what transpired, but
The devil's work transpired. I passed through there myself.
you have. And what conclusion have you come to?
It is as I said. The devil is at work here. He has many agents.
Then you do not think it's K-Knight?
On the contrary, our kind are his most favored disciples.
Ah,
Given the tumult of the country, the state of affairs that I had heard from London, he shakes his head again. His death was not merely because he was prince. I am surprised even Lady Everly seeks the title now.
why, it certainly was not a secret she sought it.
Because if even Jean Marc, his champion, and their 40 men could be slaughtered in so blazon an attack so close to the city, what hope could she have in surviving an onslaught? Everly is no warrior, mind you.
Yes.
Though she is cunning in other ways, perhaps more dangerous.
Has she shown no fear at all?
If you ask her, I imagine she would say something to the effect of a reasonable fear, a healthy amount of apprehension of being near the woods. But I do not sense that she truly is afraid of any assault. And indeed, Jean Marc, for his faults, had many enemies, particularly at the end of his nights. And Everly, for her part, has done much to subdue hers. Perhaps she is not so foolish in thinking that she is safe.
Intriguing. But until we know more, it is just thoughts for me to play with.
True. And yet that is all the philosophers have. Or had, I should say. What shall you do? He turns, look back at you.
For Praxis, it seems clear if you are not interested in the title, and I suspect the other elder is much too reclusive to even consider grabbing the title either.
He nods. I received messenger of the summons. I will go if indeed it is required, though I can tell you Cortez will not. He shall ignore the summons entirely.
Yes, it would be interesting to finally meet him.
Does he have much influence in the city?
Not anymore. He left much of the affairs here back in the 1420s, after his children were destroyed.
Indeed.
That detail was left out of conversations between myself and my sire.
Was it the witch hunters?
He nods gravely. They cost much early in the century. Though Jean Marc did much to hide their affairs, calm the neonates. Our peace was bought in their blood, I'm afraid. Everly herself had several other children who went missing around that time as well.
I see. That certainly makes the decision easy, but what is your gut feeling about her claim over Lincoln? Do you think she'll improve?
I cannot say as she would do much worse or better than Jean Marc, for perhaps in the beginning of the century, Jean Marc was less paranoid. He sought to do well by Lincoln. By the end of his nights, he saw his enemies in every shadow, and indeed, perhaps, he was proven right. Whereas Everly, he shakes his head, almost shrugging. She is ruthless. I do not expect the city to fare well under her. And yet, what choice have we?
Still, perhaps this Cortez could be convinced.
That would be impressive. To bring him out of his reclusion, his self-exile. I do not know what that would take. Or if he even cares. I do not know if the city would fare better with Everly at its helm or with no one.
Unfortunately, we cannot leave the seat empty.
I understand. And I wish you fortune in your ventures.
Many thanks. And of course, if you do notice, Everly's leadership is lacking and change your mind, I will have an open ear.
He does not respond to that. His eyes linger on the low fire in front of him. What is Elena doing?
She is listening intently, but mostly staying silent. She's leaving the talking to Robert since, well, this is the city he is most used to, so he is the one that would have the most to converse with them about.
By the way, your child is staying at my manor. I'm certain you would like to see him again. Consider this an open invitation.
He looks to you and smiles, nods once. Perhaps I shall do that. If you do indeed intend to stay more than a night or so.
Robert nods and smiles, then motions to get up and return to the main hall of Elysium.
Alright, you do so. You return and it's still quite calm and quiet in here.
How early into the night is it?
It's quite early. You think there's maybe 12 hours of night left.
Turning to Elenid. Did you want to cut out of Elysium early and seek out Cortez this night?
The question is, would we be able to find him with only vague direction?
Out of character, could Robert pinpoint his manor, Cortez's?
You know where it is. You've been a local here long enough. It's in a village called Horncastle. It's a small village, maybe 500 people, dominated by a great castle.
I do know where he is. Go ahead.
Or would it be more polite to send written word first?
Written word would never hurt, but if he will not attend any summons, perhaps a more personal touch is required.
We don't know if he won't attend. And I can say, as someone who was rather reclusive during her first few decades of this existence, having people drop in without a word would have been rather irritating to my studies. As such, I would like to extend the same, courtesy to him.
And I will bow to your wisdom in dealing with your own clan and personality.
It is less with dealing with my own clan and more with attempting to treat him with respect. Lest my sire catch wind of it, and I would rather not and be reprimanded for such things.
Very well. Perhaps set up a meeting the following night, then.
Isn't the Primogen meeting supposed to be tomorrow?
Out of character, what time will that meeting take place?
It's expected around midnight. Although, based on your evaluation, it's going to be a very small meeting.
And how far away is Horncastle?
Less than a night riding.
Oof. It's frustrating. Given what I know about Cortez, I do not think he'll show up. Do you truly wish to avoid him this night?
I would not call it avoiding him. I would call it giving him the proper courtesy.
Make an intelligence etiquette roll, Robert. Actually, you can both make that roll. Standard.
Standard?
Yes. All right. So with your specialty, Robert, that's 3 successes. Elenid, 1 success. Elenid, you know enough about etiquette among your own kind, and generally, just as a general rule, it would not be unseemly to ride out and meet in person. It wouldn't hurt to send a message ahead. It might be the highest level of etiquette, but you wouldn't be rude to go there to meet in person. And Robert, you also come to the conclusion that it's a bit excessive. You could send a message to alert that you're coming or wish to speak, but it would not be out of place at all.
Considering the time frame and the urgency, I think a forward warning via letter would consume too much time.
Very well.
Of course, do not feel the need to be drug along with me. If you'd wish to remain and listen.
He is part of my lineage. I should meet him.
Very well. I do not think much more will happen here, so perhaps we should leave now. It is a decent night's ride.
Very well. Let us be off then. Should we take the carriage just in case it's too late when we start the return?
Yes, I think it would take half a night to get there.
I will correct you, Robert. It would take you half a night riding at a good clip. A carriage will slow you down by at least a third of that speed. It'd be much slower on a carriage. You could ride there quickly.
But to ride back would be dangerous.
You could probably make it with a carriage in one night. You definitely would not be able to make it back.
I mean, with
Unless
just
we
horses.
unless we took some ghouls and some of the guard to protect us along the way, so the ghoul could sleep on the way there, and well, we could return during the day with them guys.
Oh, absolutely. If you bring your whole caravan and just camp and expect to be traveling during the day, you could do it. If you want to do this all in one night, you'd have to ride on a horse and go pretty quick.
But would the horse be able to return before sunrise?
That's the question.
Depends on the horse. Depends on the terrain.
What would Robert's knowledge of the situation say? Would he think we would be able to make it back with any time to spare?
You think so. If you didn't spend more than an hour there, if you had a horse exchange, you could certainly make it. If you left your own horse there and took a fresh one back, you could easily do it. Otherwise, it gets chancy.
And how much of the night would remain if we took a carriage?
If you took a carriage, you could probably get there and there might be a couple hours left of the night.
Wow, a couple of hours sounds better than 1 hour to me.
Yep, and then the group could rest up and we can return during the day with the mortals taking us to our previous location.
Alright. So you go about do you go immediately about setting this carriage up, getting the men ready to travel?
I don't see the point in taking all of the men. A smaller retinue would do.
So you're taking Tom's retinue?
How many?
He has 45 men in total, 20 riders. And because of his instruction, they will listen to Elenid.
I leave the call to you for how many we should take for this trip.
Can I make a roll to see how many would be suitable protection, since I doubt we need all of them?
Sure, I'll give you an intelligence academics for your knowledge of warfare. Standard difficulty.
Well then.
All those dice. No successes. You're not sure, but generally, just as kind of a common sense knowledge, it's pretty close to the city of Lincoln, the capital of the county, well-traveled roads. You probably won't need that many men, especially for such a short journey.
Mm-hmm. So somewhere about 15 to 20 would be decent, or would that be overkill?
It seems reasonable to you, given your great experience.
Okay. Then she will procure a few of them to help escort them there.
Okay, footman, I'm assuming?
And give them the instructions of once getting there, they're going to camp out and rest, and they will return during the day.
All right. Sergeant Brandon Carter agrees to this, and he selects 20 of the footmen to detach from the retinue to join you, and sets about getting the carriage ready for travel immediately. The scene fades on the group of you getting ready to travel out north to Horncastle.
Oh, and Gertrude's coming along, of course, keeping her ghoul close at hand, so... Well, none of them try anything silly like opening up the carriage in broad daylight.
All right. Gertrude's happy to be back in your company and riding with you. Meanwhile, Thomas and Cormac, you make your way over to the Coach and Horse Inn, this little bit rougher tavern attached to an inn where there's a kind of informal lyceum known among the Canaanites here, among the younger Canaanites. You enter, and as it is still fairly early into the evening, it's still quite busy here. There's people here and there, joking, gambling, drinking. It's somewhat loud at times. Everyone here seems to be in fairly good spirits. Despite the cold temperatures outside, you still see some people wearing some pretty heavy jackets and long coats. So Thomas and Cormac, you enter into this scene. What do you do?
Go ahead.
Tom is going to nudge Cormac and slide off his gauntlet ring, slip it into a breast pocket in his shirt. And then look around to see if he notices any telltale signs of feeding or anything that might give away who is.
Sure, I will have you make do a perception investigation, standard difficulty. 3 successes. You do see a group that stands out a little bit. There's a table in the far corner where there's someone you may or may not. I think you would recognize Thomas. It's an older, kind of an older looking, rougher man, face weathered by hard labor, by the name of Pierce Lockwood. I believe you may have met him in the past.
I believe so.
Do you recognize this man? He's sharing the company with 3 others. 2 are, you think, pretty obviously Kine, as they have a couple meals in front of them, and one after another you see them start drinking and chugging away at some of the really cheap ale in front of them. And the last, accompanied by Pierce, is apparently a young woman who does not have any drinks or meals in front of her. She has long black hair that kind of comes down the back of her, and she's not dressed like a wife or a seamstress. She's dressed like a sailor, more like someone ready to do work. And she seems to have a blade strapped across her chest, which does seem a bit odd for a woman. Certainly stands out a bit in this way. The 4 of them seem to be having a good time together, though.
Tom will point them out and then move across the bar so that they're in obvious direct eye shot and make eye contact with Pierce before finding a table a little ways away from.
Cormac will join Thomas. He does remember Pierce as well, but he doesn't want to intrude.
You make eye contact with Pierce Lockwood briefly, who seems to see you and look at you for a few moments and doesn't change expression on his face. And he looks back down at the table and then back to the men, going back to some kind of chit-chat, smiling as he does, and then he kind of taps the table a couple of times and rises from his seat, looking to the woman, who seems to understand something, and the 2 of them make their way from the table in the corner and begin pacing over towards the 2 of you. Pierce pulls up a chair opposite you, Thomas, and the young woman, she also grabs a stool and sits down on it, closer to Pierce than the table, but seemingly close enough to hear the discussion.
Evening, lords. What brings you to a place like this?
Unfortunate circumstances, but it's good to see you're doing well.
Well, as can be expected, I suppose. I don't know if you met Silas here before.
And he turns over to the young woman, who flashes a brief smile and kind of folds her arms.
Tom offers a hand.
She grasps you by the forearm. Pleasure to meet you.
Tom returns the gesture.
You feel her squeeze
Tom.
briefly.
He responds in kind. Long Tom. Pleasure.
Silas.
You were saying, my lord?
Tom cocks an eye at Cormac in case he wanted to.
They also look to Cormac, as you do.
Cormac just has his hand set gently on the table. He's watching this exchange.
Not much of a talker, are you? Silas says, kind of grinning at you, Cormac.
Not tonight, unfortunately. A lot on my mind. Cormac de Courcy is my name.
Fancy a ring you got there? She looks down at your hand.
Oh yes, this. It's becoming less and less useful, I'm afraid.
That's hard to believe.
It's That's why I took mine off. I'd rather it not be a factor, at least in conversations like this.
You are who you are, my lord.
Precisely. Rings be damned. I am who I am.
Seems you're about unpleasant business tonight. He looks between the two of you. Based on the demeanor.
Tom shrugs a bit. It's unpleasant, but necessary.
But as I said before, anything I can do to help out. Ain't here to cause any trouble.
Actually, I was hoping if you might facilitate some introductions. I'd very much like to... Oh.
Go ahead. He laughs a little bit.
I'd very much like to take stock of where Lincoln's population stands on the matter of who best to fill the void.
Think you might pick some better people than me to make introductions. Never been much of a socialite myself, Lord.
Tom.
Oh yes, Tom.
I'm damn tired of being lorded at.
Make a charisma expression, difficulty 7. I'll also accept etiquette if you'd rather do that. I don't know what you prefer.
I'm gonna go with etiquette, because more dice.
Okay. They're both applicable.
You said standard?
7. 2 successes. Glancing at Silas, you see she's gauging you when you describe yourself as Tom and shrugging off this title. She seems to sit back a little bit more at ease when you describe yourself this way. Right then, Tom, who would you like to be meeting?
Anyone who's willing to talk. Honestly. Just talk.
There's not many that want to talk these nights. Even around here. Some people come, they feed, then move on. Safer that way.
That's fair enough. But you're both here. And you both seem at least willing.
I'm not getting scared out of my own home. Oi.
You live here. He looks around appraisingly. You've done well.
Might as well. If you're looking for an opinion on this Everly, I think by and large you won't get one.
Actually, I was going to ask the question a bit differently. Who would you see hold that title?
Maybe you. She smiles, batting her eyelashes.
got far too much tied up in London. And I've no interest in titles.
She shrugs. Can't say there's a very good replacement. Not that Jean Marc was the greatest prince. Can't say I've met many I would consider great. That, Sir Hugh, he nods a couple times, exchanges glances with Silas. He seemed fair, but doesn't seem that interested.
I've heard it said that some men are born great, and some men have greatness thrust upon them.
Don't know what that means.
Sounds like a load of bullshit to me, too.
Some men are born to means that make them great, and some men find that they have always been great because of the circumstances they find themselves in.
Well, all that talk doesn't really do anything for putting a new prince on the pedestal.
There already is one. We're just trying to decide if she should stay there.
Yeah, right. Don't get on a bad side.
Someone saw... Go ahead.
All I was going to say is, now, what would make you say something like that?
She looks at you a bit curiously. How do I know you're not under her coin? She's got everyone under her coin. Why not you? She leans her elbow on the table and kind of points at you. Obviously lacking any real etiquette.
You'll just have to take my word for it. This is completely off the record. And he'll actually take the ring off and stick it in his pocket.
We'll also take a charisma, empathy, or etiquette difficulty 7 from you. Success. Do you have any specialties there?
Air of competence.
That's applicable. That's 5 successes. She lowers her hand on the table and smiles. I like you.
That's good. I like myself.
You see, someone saw fit to empower us to help choose who best to lead Lincoln next. I don't know whether to laugh or cry, but circumstances being what they are, I'd rather take full stock of the situation than just listen to a bunch of stuffed shirts bemoan their existence and whine.
She looks to you and then looks back to Cormac. Yes, me why? Why I don't trust her, why you should stay off the bad side. She's got a reputation around here. It's not a good one. With Jean Marc, he was all bark, no bite. We all knew he was powerful, rich, had his influence. He was paranoid. He stayed inside. Mostly didn't bother us in the last couple of decades or so. That Everly, she's a right malicious bitch.
She shakes her head. There's a rumor before my time, when the witch hunters came by through here, she set her children to the pyre to save herself.
That certainly sounds like her.
With her, she can do things... What's the word? She can be evil and not look evil. With the cults and all, you see.
He nods at this. He's beginning to get a picture. Do you think she'd be dangerous as prince? Or could such ruthlessness be good for the city?
Good for who? She's had seized, domains stripped, people finding out their friends are getting forced to relocate, people can't hunt where they used to, people feeding on rats. She lowers her voice.
See, now this I don't like. And he'll look over to Tom. Very stern look on his face.
She don't gotta kill anybody, but she can make life hell. Boy, it's true. It's a certain kind of underhanded evil she can do. But maybe for the higher ups, that's what they want. They want something like that in power.
They want someone who will be loyal to the Covenant.
He shrugs. I think she's only loyal to herself, you ask me.
News will spread.
I've never been in a city without a prince before.
That is the news I'm talking about. Even if none of the elders here want to seize the city, there are those who will come from outside to do just that.
Is that true? Go ahead.
Our whole goal here is to make sure that the prince that gets seated is strong enough to hold the domain. And, as Thomas here says, is loyal to the Covenant.
You two been out here. You've been out there. Traveling around. All the really rebels out there. Some great force.
Tom will share a conspiratorial side glance at Cormac.
Who returns that glance? We've met them. Can't say much more than that.
I don't know. Haven't been walking this earth under the night as long as you have, but starting to wonder if those rebels came by, if they wouldn't be better than any prince we could put up there. She folds her hands in front of her chest.
Do yourself a favor, girl. Keep that to yourself.
She looks up to
There's
you.
There's ears out here you don't want hearing that kind of talk. Be happy it's mine heard him.
And mine, as I said, off the record.
I believe you. For better or worse. She looks to you, Cormac.
I can't force you to throw your loyalties where you're not comfortable throwing them. Just consider the danger. Even if you wanted to find these rebels, they don't make themselves easy to find.
It could be weeks in the wild.
She nods.
But it is good to know that Sir Hugh has at least some support.
Even if a lot of us would be fine and dandy with that, I don't see him taking it up.
He wouldn't. At least I don't think so. He's never been the type.
I don't know. He struck me as a man of duty, not a man of pride.
He might try to seize praxis just out of a misguided attempt to, as you say, impose his duty. I really would like to have a word with him.
I seen him tonight. He was heading over to that one place. I don't recall. It's stuffy over there.
The Elysium, you mean?
That's the one.
Bloody Robert and Ellen are there right now.
We can go and see about joining them, or we can enjoy much more pleasant company here.
I don't want. I have no right. Oh, I don't know. I don't want to go to Elysium anyway. I'll speak with my sire later.
There wouldn't happen to be any others who'd fancy chewing the fat.
Around here, not tonight. Maybe some other nights. I'll spread the word. In the meantime, I got a couple of right drunk blokes over there. Wouldn't mind sharing. And she looks to you, Cormac, smiling.
I wouldn't mind accepting the offer.
Well, come on then, I'll introduce you. She rises from her stool.
He'll get up as well, looking at Thomas.
Mind your back. I imagine it's still sore. And he'll grin.
Don't imagine the back of your neck's fared much better.
Kind of grinned a little bit more broadly. I'll get by.
You should join us. These are the type of fellows who might put hair on your chest.
I expect there's the exact proper amount of that there already.
I should know. He grins, and not saying another word, he saunters over to the table.
Tom, you can kind of just make out Silas speaking sidelong to Cormac. Hey, what you mean by that? As the two of them walk off to this corner table.
Tom is chuckling wryly to himself.
It's a story for another time.
So with Silas's help, you get introduced to a couple of these laborers who are well into their drinks tonight, and very easy to feed on should you wish to feed.
He will, but just enough to get a bit tipsy. He'll take maybe like half a blood point from each one.
The four of you end up over in a different corner of the bar where it's dark enough for this to happen, and you're able to enjoy some of the intoxication, perhaps not quite as significantly as Belmatea's party, but it's good. It's good, fun, and the Vitae has a bit of a relaxing effect to you. Meanwhile, at the table of Thomas and Pierce, Pierce looks over to you as Cormac and Silas disappear. Anything else you doing tonight?
Don't you have something in mind?
Just want to make sure I could be the best use. Can tell you're trying to do right by the city, and not just by the elders.
The elders will be fine. They, as I'm told, keep their heads down in times of strife, weather the storms. It's those on the ground that suffer.
He nods. But if you don't mind, I gotta get back to feeding myself.
By all means, don't let me keep you from it any longer than I have.
He stands up and reaches a hand out.
Tom will grip it.
Safe night to you.
And to you.
And he also turns back. What are Cormac and Tom's plans for the remainder of the night? We'll start with Cormac.
Cormac, feeling a bit more relaxed, is up for whatever Thomas thinks they should do. He does not want to go to Elysium, though, so if that's suggested, he'll just go back to the manor.
Tom might float the idea of seeking out any other willing, anyone else willing to opine on the situation here in Lincoln.
Wandering the city streets or staying at this inn?
He definitely looked to Pierce and Silas for any directions they might get for seeking people out.
Pierce and Silas give you a few places that you might check on some of the neonates where they frequent, other taverns, other places that they've been found in the past. And so you have a little bit of a better idea of where you could go to canvass some of the Lincoln neonates.
Then he'll float that idea at Cormac.
Sorry, I was just barked at. What'd you say?
So Tom is suggesting that we go canvass the other locations that Pierce and Silas point out. We might find more of the Lincoln neonates.
Oh, Cormac's all for that. He's got a bit of his swagger back now.
Alright, so the two of you head off in the direction to look for neonates.
Indeed.
I'll have you make... both of you can make a charisma investigation or charisma etiquette standard difficulty. Alright, 5 successes together. The two of you spend much of the remaining night meeting with neonates. You end up meeting several at some of these locations. It takes some time gaining trust. It does help having the gauntlet rings off, and you're able to speak with the neonates and build some rapport quickly. You don't distance yourself or show much of your age, and you're able to get some honest answers from some of the neonates. Were you looking to get an opinion on who should rule in Lincoln, or what their opinion on Eden Everly was?
So speaking strictly for myself, Tom's general line of questioning is seeking to answer 2 points. Who would they rather see in power, since Jean Marc's not there anymore? And how do they feel about the Covenant as a whole?
All right. And Cormac?
Cormac is actually okay with going along with that line of questioning. That's where his curiosity lies as well.
Okay. Regarding who they'd like to see in charge of Lincoln, many of them do not say any elder names. They propose names never heard of. Some say Silas or Pierce, other neonate or young Ancilla. One or two kind of agree that someone like Sir Hugh would be good, but it would be difficult to see him in that kind of position. There is no true consensus on who they would like to see. They seem unsure of who they want to lead. Regarding the Covenant, there's some ambivalence. Some of them still feel it is what makes the most sense, and being part of the Covenant is safer than not, because at least it means the War of the Princes, the intercity battles, can be avoided. Others think that with the death of Jean Marc, it is a kind of omen, a harbinger of the end of the Covenant. They think that they can't even protect themselves, much less the neonates, and they think it would actually be better if there was no Covenant. You get a mixture of both.
Is it so just a broad swath, no even significant pluralities?
More would rather not see the Covenant in power. More would rather the cities be freed of the Covenant entirely.
This answer oh my god, I'm tired, sorry, interests Cormac the most. Although he won't make that immediately evident.
It's actually a consensus Thomas was kind of expecting.
It's clear to Cormac that the people are expecting to see change, and the death of a prince might be just what they need to get it.
That takes up a good portion of night. Is there anything else you want to try and do tonight?
That's pretty much it for Thomas.
Yeah, Cormac too.
Okay. And the two of you at the end of this night return to the manor in anticipation of the coming day. We will change scenes on that. Meanwhile, north of the city, we catch up with Robert de Vere and Elined Verchkingen, along with Gertrude and 20 of these footmen making their way north. It takes you a good while of traveling north along the roads. Traveling at night is slow and movement must be cautious. But towards the end of the night, you do reach a quaint little village of mostly wooden homes and thatched roofs centered around a church, which dominates the town. And there is a small wooden wall encircling the town. Outside, you pass through many tracts of lands for sustenance farming, mostly disused for the winter. And above this village, there's a hill that seems to wrap around to the east. And this imposing Gothic-looking castle of stone, many turrets jutting out, looks down. There's many spires, which make it all the more ominous. And a long dirt and stone road leading up, with a gatehouse that stops before the castle itself. And you are approaching the gatehouse. The scene focuses in on the two of you, Robert and Elined, as you draw close. Maybe only a few minutes before you arrive. What is Elined doing?
We see the gatehouse, but we are not quite there yet.
No, you have a few minutes before you get there, if you want to say anything.
Would you like me to do the talking, or is that something you would prefer to do?
By all means, feel free to lead this conversation.
Very well, though I have only briefly heard about him. I know nothing else about the man. Nor do I know how often him and my sire were in contact.
Well, we are here to gauge if he is appropriate for praxis.
You arrive at the gatehouse, and after alerting the front gate guard to who you are, or at least who you want to speak to, you are made to wait for quite some time. Close to half an hour before the large wooden gates open inward, and you're allowed to pass through. Although your men are forced to stop outside. They're not allowed inside the castle.
I did not expect them to be able to enter.
Your horses are stabled, and you are escorted by a few guards to the Great Hall. Gertrude is allowed to join you. Once you get inside the Great Hall, you see it is very dark and very cold. There is no warm hearth to greet you, as you would find in most Great Halls. It's actually a bit difficult to see inside. There are large windows which let in some dim light, but these nights are very dark in the winter. And for a time you're left there alone as the doors close behind you, until a man comes from down the hallway holding a lantern, the greatest source of light here. You can see he's clad heavily in the winter clothes, as the lack of heat in this great castle seems to affect him.
Good evening, my lord, my ladies. I apologize for the cold entrance. It is to my lord's preference. May I start a fire for you?
It is quite fine, and our apologies for such short notice.
And who did you say you represented again?
The Gauntlet. And Robert will extend his hand.
He looks down, focusing on the ring, and then look up to you and to Elenid.
Though I am... My visit was not hoping to throw that term around, but it is what we are part of, yes. My name is Elenid Versinghen.
He nods a couple times.
Well, surely I can prepare a meal or two for you. Must have traveled for some time.
It is quite all right. We ate before we left.
Truly, my lady, it would be no great difficulty.
It is quite all right, I assure you.
That is enough, Williams. You hear a man speak from your side in the darkness, entering from the almost pitch-black hall beyond. A man appears who is himself very dark even as he enters the light of the lantern. He wears a white doublet and hose, but the light seems to almost shy away from him. His hair is a dark slate gray and down to his shoulders, and his eye is a piercing ocean blue. You think maybe somewhere in his 30s. It's difficult to say. Well, he does seem fit, if not a bit trim.
Leave us.
he says, looking to the man, who bows deeply and disappears in another dark hall. And the man gestures out into the great hall, where a number of seats around a long table sit.
She will turn to this man and, out of courtesy, curtsies says, "Hello, it is a pleasure to meet you."
Robert too will give a polite bow.
His face is grim and stoic. He seems unimpressed. And he begins walking over to the long wooden table. He gestures for the two of you to sit down.
She will do so.
Robert will take a seat as well.
My apologies. I would have sent word ahead of time if I had the time to do so.
I know who you represent. Why have you come?
That. First is for more official business matters. I believe Robert is more eloquent with that. But I have heard of you briefly, and, well, there was some curiosity.
What have you heard?
Only what I have heard from my sire.
And whom is that?
Villainous di Amore.
You are the More's child.
She nods.
Did you have others?
One other. Though he is not in good favor. And, well, my brother does have a child of his own now as well, though I am not currently in contact with him, so I know not what's going on with him.
What are their names? What families do they come from?
She will list their names. Well, she doesn't know... Well, does she know? Yes, she was given the name of the child, and of course she'd know her brother's name. She would give that as well.
You know, your brother in Vite is Guy Bassett, and his child is Santiago Vasquez.
She will give those names.
Vasquez. That's an Asturian name.
He seems to pace, looking mildly irritated.
Seems the blood of my dear Sire Julian grows not only thin, but dirty as well. The tragedy. I have not heard of the More in some time.
If If you would like information, I can share what's been going on as of late, but...
The hour is late, child. Speak what you will.
She will glance over at Robert for the more official matters, since Robert is much more eloquent with his words than she is.
Robert will give a polite smile. We come on the issue of praxis. I've heard it said that you have little interest in it, and there was a chance you may dismiss the summons. I wish to verify it for myself.
I have received the word. I will not attend. Praxis is determined. Everly holds it.
And this sits well with you.
He smirks faintly as he paces back to you.
She would be an effective ruler, and I am sure she will be loyal to your covenant. I endorse her for praxis over Lincoln. That is what you are here to hear. No? Take my words, whatever master bid you forth. Cortez de Arunia supports Everly for praxis.
That is the most official statement I've heard, but it is very dismissive. I asked if it sat well with you.
Little sits well with me these nights. Everly least of all.
Aye. Condolences for your loss.
What loss?
He looks at you suspiciously.
She looks over at Robert more for the please be quiet.
Well, I can only assume that is why you've given to being a recluse.
Please, please do not. It is...
You see the shadows start to swirl unnaturally around him, almost like a storm across the wall. They move.
She... Nona just face palms, goes, sit. Alright.
He walks over to you, Robert, almost looming at you. The shadows seem to make him unnaturally tall, or at least appear so.
Make no mistake, Gauntlet Lord, I destroyed my children.
Ah, was it by your own hand? Forgive me, then.
By the hand of the church, that would have sought me to the fire. Just as Everly did.
He turns away from you.
Ah. I myself have been in a similar situation with the church.
You cast them to the flames to save yourself?
Not willingly, but... Indeed, that is what happened. The life of the mortal family I attempted to foster, lost to the flames.
Make a charisma empathy roll, difficulty 8. 3 successes. He turns to you and studies you, skeptically, but lets you continue.
There was not a moment I have not myself for their loss of life. Yet, I'm still here.
And you may know something of loss, but what do you know of destruction?
Due to my new office, I've had to put innocent neonates to their certain death. No, my hands are not clean. They are stained.
He looks at you for a long time before nodding once.
Then you know what it is to lose by your own hand.
I do.
Everly is the worst kind of snake. A snake that knows the law and makes the courtroom for her den. And she is aware of my vitriol for her, but we both know that I will not act against her. And in this way we have a very loving hate for each other. For we both shared in the same loss. Spared of the fires, but for our own children. You ask how it sits with me. I'd vomit blood at the thought of her ruling anything. But there's nothing for it.
He folds his hands.
Not true. And if we return news of a more promising candidate, if you are willing to accept this burden for the good of Lincoln, this could be arranged.
I can tell you there are no other candidates in Lincoln. As for myself, why would I do that?
And surely you have some love of at least a little of this land.
This land is poisoned. All of it. And even if I sought such a thing, Everly is not one to go up against unprepared. She is not one you can strike down with a sword. Her battles are not fought with steel.
That is how you typically fight your battles.
Robert, that is how the traditional battle is fought.
Her wars end and begin under the same sun, waged with quills and scrolls. I will not wake up and find my belongings repossessed, my lands taken, silver on manifest taxation. She has weapons you cannot fight against.
Yes, you are wise to be wary of her connections. I trust you have no defenses against such attacks.
You are in my defense. I've removed myself from her path.
And when she is Praxis,
Then God willing, she will keep to herself, as I will to mine.
Then it seems nothing can be said to convince you otherwise. However, I'm curious. What was your relation with my grandsire? I speak, of course, of Jean Marc.
He looks to you and nods once. He was paranoid, but not unduly so. He had many enemies, but I respected him as a man. He had his weaknesses, but he was fair.
Harbert nods slowly at this. May he rest in peace.
Have you heard anything about, well, any stories regarding the forests around Lincoln?
I've been in these lands for some time. Forests are as forests shall be.
Nothing of the trees being manipulated.
He looks at you skeptically. What sorcery do you speak of?
The one that ended my grandsire's own life.
Yes, it is, well, Sardini already knows about it, so I see no point in not saying. The trees, well, according to the investigations that were undertaken by by our entire coterie, but mainly noticed by Robert and Cormac, the trees seem to have been manipulated, branches twisted, some supernatural ability.
As he stands there looking to the two of you, the shadows coalesce to darken the light. There are many unnatural abilities in this world, as you should know best.
Indeed there are.
The shadows recede again. But these forests hold no stories of such manipulation.
Do you know of any Cainite or otherwise takes the form of a woman? Any stories of one that would have mastery over nature?
I've never heard of such things before. But this is a very large world, isn't it?
And that it is.
There are things older than I out there. Regarding the city, perhaps I would help, but as I have explained, there is a limit to what I can do against one such as Everly. If you found a way to defeat such a creature, perhaps if you found this forest spirit, otherwise, I'll remain here, out of her way. If you cannot find a certain defeat to her, then I advise you to stay out of her way as well.
Very well. We shall keep this in mind, and thank you for your hospitality.
He rests a hand on one of the chairs, watching the two of you stoically. You may stay for the coming day, as it is upon us soon. But on dusk tomorrow, you must leave.
We had planned to get back on the road, but Robert will look towards Elenid. If you wish to stay.
Leonard will glance back, and in brief consideration, would they have enough time to return the following night, before the meeting they're all supposed to attend?
Possibly. Not certainly.
It is possible for us to be able to return in time, should we remain. Though it is not a certainty.
Perhaps not with carriage. That may be too risky. We do not wish to miss this meeting.
Whom are you meeting?
Everly said she was calling together the Primogen.
He laughs briefly. The Primogen. Abba is dead. I am here. She sits on the throne. And Sir Hugh, who could say? I'm sure he has no interest either. Primogen.
Your suspicions are correct in that.
Not that Jean Marc ever took much counsel from any of us. I would hardly call us a council at all. As I said, you may stay here or go. It is your choice. Do not remain another night. And he begins to turn and leave.
Of course. Thank you for your time.
And as he goes, the light seems to return a bit more. What did the two of you do?
Well, because it isn't a guaranteed thing, and this guy seems to want to be left on his own, she's all for returning during the day.
Yeah, perhaps if we rode the horses here, that'd be a different story, but since we took a carriage, it seems more prudent to just take that back.
Yeah.
Very well. So the two of you gather up Gertrude and your 20 men, and you begin setting out on your carriage. And the scene fades on the group of you departing from Horncastle. And as that fades, we will end the scene and end the session, and we will pick it up again next week. Also, I'm having a nosebleed, so good timing.
That's what happens when you eat a shepherd's pie too quick.
I was going to say Coke, but, you know.
One or the other. Let's do some entertaining role players. Start with Elenid.
I'm going to give it to Robert for, well, being the forefront for the portions that he was in.
I love how easily Robert just blurted out, "Sorry about your two dead children."
Yeah, I know.
That you murdered.
Meanwhile, Elenid's on the other side of the table, just face, hand.
That's great. It's a good thing you succeeded on your roll, though. That worked in your favor. You had the right things to say. Robert, what about you?
I'll give it to Elenid for being the companion and an appropriate facepalm.
And being completely terrified of her apparent granduncle.
Yeah, he's not too pleasant of a guy.
Not by any means.
Cormac, what about you?
I'm gonna give it to Elenid too for holding together her shit when Robert was gonna bring it crash.
Perfect. And Thomas.
I'm going to give it to Robert for accidentally stumbling into a solution to that problem. Just kind of ass over tea kettle directly into the right things to say.
Yeah, kind of a roller coaster of emotion there. Cool. 2 Robert, 2 Elenid. Excellent. I'm going to give 1 experience all around. And we will pick it up again next week.